I have with me Richard Haberstroh, and we are talking about Prince of Peace Regional Catholic School, which was in Sayville, New York. Richard was a student there, and I'll just say before we get started that I am related to Richard. I am his mother, so I also am familiar with the school. So, Richard, what were the years that you attended Prince of Peace?
So I was there from, I guess I started in 2000 in pre-K and graduated there in 2010.
Right.
So I was there for
I,
10 school years.
that sounds right to me. I'm a little fuzzy with the years, but that sounds about right. Do you know anything about the history of the school?
So I do know that before I attended it, a while back, it was just a school for the St. Lawrence Church. And then eventually they combined it with Good Shepherd, Our Lady of the Snow, and St. John Nepomucence. So it became a regional Catholic school for all four churches.
Do you remember anything about those two, preschool and kindergarten? Any memories of anything that went on in those classes?
A little bit. Not too much about pre-K. In kindergarten, I remember just basics like learning the alphabet. I remember there was a nap time in kindergarten. We'd have about 15 to 30 minutes for a
That's
nap
right.
after recess.
It was a full day kindergarten.
Yeah, it was.
Right. And the reason why the kindergarten was so popular at Prince of Peace, as you may well know, was that it was a full-day kindergarten, and the district of Connetquot had only part-time kindergarten. So the parents who needed a full-time kindergarten class enrolled there. A lot of them enrolled their children into the Prince of Peace school because of the full-time kindergarten. And then, like the year after you you were in kindergarten class, the Connetquot School District went to full-day kindergarten. So the attendance, the class size for Prince of Peace for kindergarten dropped way down.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went to one class instead of the two.
Yeah, I remember they had two kindergarten classes.
That's right.
There.
So I'm sorry.
They also had two preschool classes.
Right, and I think that remained, did it?
I think so.
I don't think. Can you tell us how the classrooms were arranged?
So on the first floor, you had the gymnasium / auditorium, the administrative area, and right next to that were the preschool classrooms. Up a small set of stairs from the preschool classrooms was the kindergarten room. There was another, when they had the two, there was a second kindergarten classroom in the basement.
Oh. So there was a basement.
There was, yeah. And then on the top floor, they had the rest of the classrooms for grades 1 through 8 when they eventually went up to 8th grade.
And I remember the hallways on the main floor. Mm-hmm. There were tin ceilings or walls.
Right. Yeah, the tin ceilings on the first and second floor.
Yeah. A playground there?
So there was a playground in back. That was mainly for the kindergarten students. There was a gymnasium. It was also an auditorium. It had a few different uses. It had a tile floor, which was not the best for playing basketball when they had that.
I remember, didn't they have mats up on along the walls so that
they had
sliding children would
padding under the hoop, but you definitely needed it there in case you went sliding into the wall.
Yeah, but they changed that, didn't they?
Yes, eventually they put epoxy over the tile, and it's a little safer for
I,
basketball.
I remember they did a fundraiser for that,
Yeah.
the parents, and they were able to raise the money to put in that floor. It was a
Right.
blue floor.
Yeah, blue epoxy that they put over top
Yeah.
and
So-
put in new lines for the court.
So it was a gym, auditorium, like sort of both, right?
Right. And they even had a little, not really cafeteria on the side, just sort of a kitchen off to the side.
Right.
They would store like the lunches there. I think you could get little cartons of milk. So they stored those in a fridge in there. And then they'd order lunches from a deli. You could pay for that.
Was it Friday pizza? They would bring in pizza.
Right. Yeah.
And what were some of the classroom routines?
So every morning we had prayer and pledge, the usual. And then Mondays, we actually did something unusual. Everyone would gather in the hallway upstairs, and we'd kind of have a special prayer service for memory of 9/11. So they instituted that while I was in kindergarten because that's when 9/11 occurred. And they did it ever since until they closed
Did
down.
you attend masses at St. Lawrence?
Yeah, we did. So once a month, we would go over across the street to the church and attend mass. Just a regular weekday mass, nothing special about it. So there are also some people there for a regular mass.
Were there all classes that went? Would the kindergarten class go, or was it just?
I think it was just 1 through 8 that would go.
Did you have a recess?
Yeah, we did have a recess. For grades 1 through 8, it was right out in the parking lot on the pavement. Every few grades had their own section of it, so they split it up into 4 corners really, and your grade had to stay in your corner, so they had first and second on one part, third and fourth grade on another part. So it was kind of split up by age. Some of the older grades would get to, I remember on Mondays when I went there, Wednesdays when I went there, we would be allowed to go out to the side. There was a little patch of grass and we could throw around a football. So
Some of the activities that they had that were there. I mean, did you have like library? Did you have music, art?
right. So we had library, we had gym classes, we had art, we had music. There was a band instruction that would take place, I think, once a week during the day for students who wanted to do it, and they could perform at the regular concerts that we had around the holidays.
And you played what instrument?
I played the glockenspiel,
Right.
or the bells, as some people might know it.
Right. And I believe the band instructor was Mr. Lesser.
Right, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, and were there activities like clubs or athletics, things?
Yeah, we had sports. We had basketball, baseball, cross country, kind of basic small team sports or individual sports. The basketball was pretty popular. We actually had 2 male basketball teams at one point because there were so many students interested. Even despite the small class sizes, we only had around 10 to 20 students per class, per grade.
Right.
And yeah, they managed to pull enough for quite a few sports.
That is a popular sport then.
Yeah.
And who coached these teams?
It was always parents that pitched in and helped coach. Parents would volunteer to help drive us to games. We'd have to go as far out as the South Fork of Long Island to play some of these games. So
So you'd pile
definitely
into a
a
few
commitment.
cars and head
Do you
out.
remember
Right? Any of the fundraising activities that the school did?
Right. So there was spaghetti dinner was a big one. That was a pretty popular one.
I
Um,
remember working that, and I know it was people sitting around, usually the parents, eating the spaghetti and maybe a couple of kids, but
Yeah.
mostly kids just running around
Right.
the
Yeah.
gym. Little kids, big kids, just running around, and some parents sitting at the table.
Yeah. That was a big thing, getting to go there with
Spaghetti.
some friends and kind of run amok around there.
And
There was also breakfast with Santa, so they'd get get a Santa to come all dressed up, and they'd do breakfast. I forget exactly what they had there, but they also had games and stuff that some of the older students would volunteer to help run.
and everybody would get their picture taken with Santa.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then there was the fashion show.
Right. The fashion show. Yeah.
Right.
Again, they had the older students do that.
Right. The older students were the models.
Right. Yeah. We were the models. We'd put on all these fancy, like, one thing I vaguely remember was almost a tuxedo looking thing that I got to wear around.
Got to be a model for the night.
Yes.
And then you had field day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Field day. That was a very popular day. We get to go to a park somewhere in the south neighborhood of Sayville. I forget the name of it exactly.
Right.
But yeah, it would be a full day just out there playing kickball or whatever. And
Yeah. Doing races and games.
they'd order lunch somewhere.
Right. And I remember they would have teams, and you'd have to wear a particular color.
Right. Yeah, we
The
had some
team was going to be that color. Right.
the potato sack race and all that.
Potato sack race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And balancing the egg on the spoon.
Did you have any class trips?
So I remember once every few years, they would have a trip to a place called Nature's Classroom in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the lucky few who would get to go. My class managed to be, just the right year when they sent somebody. So we got to go up there. We spent a full week kind of out in the woods up in Connecticut, doing hands-on learning out in the outdoors. It was a pretty unique experience.
What were some of the changes that occurred while you were there? Do you remember any of them?
So I mentioned that little Monday prayer thing that they would do in the hallway. We had our first new principal that was a lay person.
Yeah. You mentioned that you went through 8th grade, and that was one of the changes that happened while you were there.
Yeah. So they only went up to 6th grade initially. And then around the time that I was in 4th grade, they extended it to be kind of a full middle school also. So it went up to. So another program they had was Aftercare. So if a parent couldn't pick up their child or have the bus drop them off at the house.
That was me. Yeah.
I was one of those kids. You could stay after school till about 6 o'clock at the latest. They would have the students downstairs in one of the classrooms. They had games. You could play cards. If there was a basketball game being played there, you could go watch it. So they had ways to keep students busy until they were able to leave.
And what was the most memorable teacher that you had?
So my personal favorite, and I gotta say all of them were great, but my personal favorite was my math teacher, Mrs. Shephard.
And she was a teacher for the older students, wasn't she?
Yeah. When they eventually introduced the middle school into it. She taught math for 6th through 8th grade. They might have also had 5th grade in there. I forget exactly.
And I used to see her too at like the baseball games. She would come to them. She had some school
Right.
spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, she was big into watching
What
the
did you
basketball.
like about the school?
I guess it was nice that you knew everybody in the school. I mean, there were small classes. My graduating class from there was 16 students, including me.
16.
So you really knew everybody. You
Anything
saw
you would
everybody
like to
every
say
day.
about Prince of Peace that perhaps we didn't cover?
I think we touched a lot of it, just how, it's a small kind of close-knit group there.
Right.
It was always kind of like you knew everybody. Everyone was, like you said, the parents were always helping out, pitching in whenever they could,
Right.
volunteering for events. Yeah. Just kind of one big family.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing it.
Mhm.
It's a trip down memory lane for sure for us, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.